So my views on Lauren Southern is that there are things that I agree with her on. There are no doubt things that I disagree with her on. One of them just happened to be on free trade.
Any individual country by itself, on the average, tends to benefit from free trade regardless of what the other countries do.
Don't believe him? Well, recent polling finds the majority of economists agree that free trade is a net benefit.
Wow, I heard the majority of political science teachers think that libertarianism is retarded. They're experts in their field, so they must be right.
So no doubt I would imagine that she voted for Trump and supported Trump, which is fair enough. I respect her own personal opinion. But with a free market, it's really all down to the freedom of the marketplace and where they trade and export goods. I think it's really all down to the consumer. Consumers should have the free choice. I mean, a great example would be China. China set down barriers in trade. If consumers from, say for example, Britain or the United States, having free trade, decide to buy goods from that country, I don't believe it's such an issue. If we did have free trade, if we had free markets, our countries would flourish, and we're not forced to trade, we're not forced to buy from those countries. If consumers freely wish to, and if they can get cheaper goods from those countries, then let them be. This relationship, if for example China does set down the trade barrier, and let's say it's the United States of America or Great Britain that have free trade, the only one that's going to really hurt themselves is China. They're the ones affecting themselves. They're not going to affect the economies, which are free markets. I don't agree with her on that one personal issue.
Libertarians are weird. We're weirdos. People who like less state are weirdos. It's true. We are born to be collectivists.
So she does say libertarians are weird. I mean, I wouldn't really classify myself as someone weird as such. Maybe if you want to classify and put that word into context as meaning to be different, then sure, maybe that's the case.
If the government accepted refugees into a country where there was no current property owner who wished to bring them onto their land, that would be forced integration by the government.
She's completely correct. I mean, at the end of the day, I respect the fact that she's a realist. I admire her for that. I think you have to look at things from a realist perspective. It's all well looking at things and saying, well, the free flow of immigration would be all nice and everything. However, you have to take into consideration that you do have private property and other private property rights, and you can't just have people just walking onto people's private land, private property, and saying or doing whatever they like, and their rights have to be protected.
The second reason why libertarians should think twice about immigration is a cultural one. The question we need to ask ourselves is, do the immigrants we're welcoming to our shores come from a culture of liberty? The refugees are coming from an extremely different culture to us here in the West. Middle Eastern societies are characterized by rampant homophobia, religious intolerance, and sexism.
So I completely agree with Lauren Southern on the control of immigration and on this issue. Just because laws work in one country doesn't mean to say that it works in another country. Every country has a different culture, different heritage. We all have different laws. And I've said before, there is a threat from the type of people you let in.
Once you replace one population with another, it will not be the same.
When you bring the third world to the first world, you don't get the first world.
What I do agree with her on is that if, say for example, you had the free flow of immigration from the third world, there becomes a very serious problem for two main reasons. Immigration without assimilation, through the free flow of immigration, mass foreign immigration, you would end up with the subversion and division. Simply because you have that immigration without assimilation. You need to do it over a long and gradual time period. I don't believe that it's down to a genetic problem. It's more to do with a historical circumstance, where they came from. For example, the African continent, as sad as it is to say, is completely brainwashed. That's because they flirted with Marxism and Leninism due to historical circumstances. When you look at education, when you look at things such as the history, and you could look at Scotland as a fine example. When you compare Scotland to the 18th and 19th century to that of what Scotland has become today, there is a massive difference, a colossal difference. And all of that, it's nothing to do because, it's genetics. Because if that was the case, then how did Scotland come out of nowhere and flourish through a Scottish Enlightenment and become an influence to the rest of the world? After all, the late 18th century, most of Europe was reading and learning from Scotland, and in the words of Voltaire himself, he says, "We look to Scotland for all our ideas of civilization." Even in the words of the great Sir Winston Churchill once said, "Of all the small nations of this earth, perhaps only the ancient Greeks could surpass the Scots to the contribution to mankind. As they say, the Brits may have ruled the earth, but the Scots populated it." And what that simply means is Scotland was at one point the world leader of medicine. It might arguably still be today. That's at least one thing Scotland has held on to, and I'm not saying there aren't intelligent people in Scotland today. Of course there is. When you compare in comparison to the average person of society in Scotland today to what it would have been back then, there's quite a colossal difference. Even in terms of innovation, there's a massive difference, and what it really all boils down to is economic freedom. That's what it really comes down to, and of course your education system. When you talk about a third world continent such as Africa, historically has remained from its dark ages and hasn't really progressed as such as where it should be, and that is because of historical circumstances. It's because of all the slavery, all the flirting with Marxism and Leninism. They even faced a period of British colonialism. They've never really truly had the freedom, and they don't really have the knowledge of individual liberty. Those African people are every bit as intelligent as any other individual.
Many former libertarians are turning to nationalism, and even to its most extreme manifestations in the alt-right. It's this last group, of course, that seems to be causing the biggest headache for establishment-minded libertarians, with the never-Trumpers now claiming there's a libertarian pipeline to the alt-right.
Things are more simplistic. In other words, what I'm saying is you're either a libertarian or you're not a libertarian, and therefore I don't believe in using all these alternative names, etc. that just confuses things. When it comes down to the whole alt-right movement, I felt that was the same thing. I've still got a lot to learn about the alt-right, because to be honest with you, I know very little about them. If, however, alt-rightists support small and limited government and support free markets, then what's the point in the name alt-right? I don't get it. Classical liberals supported very much the things that some of these people are coming out and saying of what they support, and I'm thinking to myself, well, why don't they just call themselves classical right-wing conservatives? Is it because the so-called right wing today has become so manipulated that it seems almost identical to the left? But I'll tell you what threw me off. Protectionism. The idea of protectionist tariffs.
I know that establishment libertarians will probably respond saying, "Gee, Lauren, if you care so much about what libertarian intellectuals say, why do you ignore them on free trade and immigration?" First off, I'm pretty sure only someone as stupid as Kim Jong-un believes the idea that free trade is bad all the time. If you could get every single country on Earth to let down their trade barriers completely and quit manipulating their fiat currency, you'd probably have a more economically efficient system. But that's like saying socialism would work great if only everyone would stop being so selfish.
You cannot say on one hand, I support capitalism, and then on the other hand say, I oppose free trade, because that is basically what capitalism's all about. It's all about the freedom to trade and exchange. So anyway, folks, I don't know what your own personal views are. I quite like, and that's the first time I've really properly looked at Lauren Southern, to be perfectly honest with you. It's the first time, and I agree with most of the things that she says. So anyway, folks, if you like the video, give the video a thumbs up, and share the video, favourite the video, and of course, thank you for watching. Okay, cheers.